Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Double Play. In this video, Jack and I are going to be starting the NL Central with our season previews. It's kicking off with the Cubs. We're going to first recap their 2022 offseason and then move forward to talk about their 2023 season. Jack, this team was very busy this offseason, and there was a lot of names involved here, coming and going. Let's go ahead and talk about it. Let's see how it went.
Yeah, Cubs were busy. Cubs fans were busy at our DMs all offseason. They don't like our takes.
Wow.
They don't like any takes that we have about the Cubs, but we'll see. I'm sure we'll have some comments underneath this video and any TikToks we make this week. But let's go to the notable additions or keeps. It starts with kind of the big fish. That's Dansby Swanson. He comes over from the Braves. Cody Bellinger, former MVP, former Dodger. He's now in the Windy City. Jamison Tyone, Trey Mancini, Eric Hosmer, some other bigger name pieces, and then some of the smaller guys that maybe you're going to fly under the radar, like a Drew Smyly, who's going back into the starting rotation. Edwin Rios, another former Dodger. Tucker Barnhart, he's slotted in to be the opening day catcher, first opening day catcher since Wilson Contreras. And then Michael Fulmer and Brad Boxberger. We mentioned Wilson Contreras. He's on the outs. He's going to a different NL Central team, the Cardinals, who we're going to talk about later this week. They also lose Jason Hayward, Clint Frazier, and Wade Miley. Overall, Ryan, biggest addition or subtraction in your mind, who is it?
I'm going to go with the subtraction side of this and go Wilson Contreras. And, you know, I hate to highlight a loss here in the offseason that they had, because once we get into our grade, I like the Cubs offseason as a whole. I like what they were doing. But I just have to highlight this a little bit because Tucker Barnhart, I really don't like him. He is a former Gold Glove winner, but when you dive down into it, I mean, he hasn't won since 2020. He played 38 games in that season. Before that, I think it was 2017. He was 28th on my catcher rankings. He's a bad framer, and he's bad in defensive runs saved. And he's definitely not an offensive catcher. His value is on the defensive end. He's actually solid in blocking. I don't know if you saw Baseball Savant added a new blocking runs saved, so I'm able to cross-reference that a little bit. So he's actually a solid blocker, but in the other stats that are also important for catchers, he's not great. So I think the loss of Wilson Contreras, you're obviously going to lose that bat. That you might make up in other positions for the Cubs going forward, but it hurts when you replace him with Tucker Barnhart, Wilson Contreras being one of the best catchers in baseball.
They're like two sides to me. It's kind of like the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other. The devil saying, you know, the catcher position isn't the most important. You know, no catcher really hits, so is it really worth, investing your money into one of those catchers that does hit? But then the angel is saying, look what happened to the Giants when they lost Buster Posey. Look what happens to these teams that lose leaders at the catcher position. And Wilson Contreras, after the mass exodus of talent a couple years ago at the trade deadline, he was that last lone Cub from the World Series team, from all the Cub teams that had previously been in the playoffs. And we're going to talk about it later this week, where the Cardinals lost Yadier Molina, and maybe they're going to replace that with some of the veteran leadership and the experience of Wilson Contreras. The Cubs, I know Tucker Barnhart has been around, but he hasn't seen the same things that Wilson Contreras has. He hasn't led a team like Wilson Contreras had to do last year in Chicago. So I think I could make the argument that having a drop off at the catcher position at the with a talent level isn't the most important thing. I don't think it's going to hugely impact the Cubs on offense. At the same time, though, you're losing a lot of experience and a lot of veteran leadership and a lot of, Wilson Contreras manning that pitching staff that hasn't been great in a couple years. So there's two sides of it, but I agree. I think the loss of Wilson Contreras is big. You might not see it in the run output this season, but I think you're going to see it in the makeup of this team, because catchers are leaders. That's why they're still an important position. And so I think that's why losing Wilson Contreras will hurt. I think most people would expect us to say Dansby Swanson's the big addition, because he was touted as one of those big shortstop prospects, or the shortstop free agents. People know I haven't been the biggest fan of Dansby Swanson as a free agent. I think that his one season, if you really dig into it, wasn't as great as we were all thinking it was last year. It was mostly just how big of a jump he took. And again, there's no saying that he can't take an even bigger jump next year. But I don't think there's a single one of these signings that I say is the biggest addition. So for me, I think the biggest addition is just adding bulk. You're adding 4 to 5 to maybe even 6 guys into the starting lineup. You're bringing back Drew Smyly in the rotation. So it's just a lot of bulk that will change this Cubs roster. We're gonna say how much we think it's gonna change, but overall, I think it's just the names and the numbers and just how many people they added is really where you're gonna see the biggest change.
I do really like the Dansby Swanson. I will dive into that a little bit specifically. I know you're, like you said, the one season you're not as high as him, but I do like him, and I think it was a good signing for the Cubs team. in terms of value, if you're looking at the contract itself, maybe it's a little bit high, $25 million a year for 7 years. So it's a might be a little bit a high price is what I'm trying to say. But for a guy that maybe takes over that leadership role, a guy, you lose Wilson Contreras, a guy who won a World Series, and now you add Dansby Swanson, who's won a World Series and was, so I could, yeah, you could make an argument he was sort of the face of the Braves a little bit, at least for the fan base. He wasn't necessarily their best player, but a guy who has that leadership experience, and he's got the potential, like you said. But like you said, for the offseason as a whole, I like it. And I like the pieces they brought in, kind of there's some like low risk, high rewards in there. I went with a B for them. I like how they got better, in my opinion, and adding Dansby Swanson, it showed Cody Bellinger, Tayo into the rotation, Mancini and Hosmer. They're at least showing an effort to get better, and they obviously do with those names. So I like it for a B here.
Yeah, I went with a B as well. The way I wrote it down is they went quantity over quality. Like, I'm not in love with the Dansby Swanson signing. Like, I think, maybe I might have been if it was one of those different shortstops like Xander Bogaerts. I would have loved this offseason maybe a little bit more. Maybe that bumps it to a B+. But I think the quantity will definitely help the Cubs. Is it exactly who I would have picked? I'm not quite sure. Do I think Cody Bellinger is going to return back to MVP form, maybe even All-Star form? I'm not really sure I'm buying that right now. Eric Hosmer, on the downswing of his career. Some of these guys, like, maybe they wouldn't be my first choices, but we've seen a lot of teams, Ryan, that haven't added anyone, so I'm going to reward the Cubs for going out and at least trying to make moves. I think a B is very... I think it's a very respectful grade. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of some of these specific names that they went out to target, I can still respect the fact that they're going out there and trying to get better.
Yeah, I mean, I like it for them. Like you said, they're trying to get better, and I think they do get better. And there may be, it's definitely a step in the right direction for me, and kind of expecting what to expect for them this season. I'm expecting a battle for second place in the division. I think we've seen, like you mentioned at the top, there's some Cubs fans who think they're better than that, and maybe a division winner in that division. Not expecting that, but I think for a battle for second in the division is good for the Cubs and a step in the right direction, like I said. And you're moving towards competing, and even though it is a weak division, so record-wise they might not be in the second place division for some other divisions, but for the NL Central, that's all that matters to them. That's all they have to be going forward. If they can add a few more pieces and kind of develop some of their younger prospects and maybe extend to some guys, maybe you trade Ian Happ. I don't know what they're going to do there, but I'm expecting a battle for second place in the division, and not playoffs for me. I think we're on the same page there, but I'll say I see a world where it's a potential for them, is what I'll say. I think it's harder in the National League than the American League to be that third wildcard team with how stacked it is, but there is a scenario in my mind that they're in the picture, is what I'll say.
I mean, I can see them battling for second in the division, but I'll come out right out and say it. The second place in the NL Central is not going to the playoffs. Like, I'm fairly confident in that, considering the talent that we have seen in the NL West, because one of the Dodgers and the Padres can't win, and one of the Mets and the Braves or the Phillies, two of those teams can't win the division. So, I mean, right now, that's the bulk of everyone's playoff predictions. You add in teams that we've talked about, like the Giants, maybe the Diamondbacks take a step up. You still have the Brewers, who I think are still a step ahead of the Cubs, and we're going to talk about the Brewers later this week. I'm not the biggest fan, but I do still think, their starting pitching and some of the names that people might be underrating in their lineup still put them a tier ahead of the Cubs, but I like what the Cubs are building. I think it's going to be another season that we see from a guy like Seiya Suzuki, who unfortunately is down with injury. He's growing into another year in the MLB. Nico Horner, who I'm going to talk about in a little bit, he's coming into another season in the majors. And you've got some of these other names that if one of them pops, then next season maybe you talk about the playoffs. Not sure I see it this season. Sorry, Cubs fans, but I still think it's definitely going to be an improved team. How much of an improvement we're going to see, I think that depends on, how well these other teams play in the division. If the Cardinals take a step back or the Brewers take a step back, like I think we're both assuming they're going to, then I think the Cubs can jump up a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you get some of those prospects as well. I mean, Pete Crow Armstrong, he's not going to come up yet, but like you said, if you can take a step in the right direction, he's looking to be one of the better prospects in baseball right now, or at least has a chance to be up there. And so right now the Cubs' focus should be on preparing for the future. And like I said, I'm expecting a step in the right direction, but not too big of a step like the Orioles where they're almost in the playoffs. But that's not what every team can do. That's not what every team is expecting to do. And so I think a battle for second place. I mean, you can tune into record predictions that we have coming next week, but I think they lose that battle. It's going to be close in my mind down the stretch, but I think it's going to be a step in the right direction, like I keep reiterating for the Cubs. And for my prediction, I think one piece that might help them take a step in the right direction, at least this year, I think Cody Bellinger bounces back. I've heard a lot of Cubs fans say, "Oh my God, he hits a home run against Team USA. He's going to win MVP Belly's back." So I'm not going that far, but I think he goes above a 100 WRC plus, which is league average. I think he's an above league average hitter.
That would be a big step after the last couple seasons.
Last season it was in low 80s, and the season before that was like 40 something. I don't remember what 2020 was, but obviously 2019 was the MVP year. So I think that's a step in the right direction for him, and it'll be good for the Cubs. And maybe I would probably say if that happens, they're going to be trading him at the deadline because they won't be in a picture. They probably won't be in the market to pay him the big bucks that him and Scott Boras are going to command if he has flashes of an MVP season. So I think it'll be good for the Cubs to maybe get a piece or two from him, send him to a contender. So that'll help both sides get in their step in the right direction.
Yeah, because I think we can both agree, and I think that Cubs fans, if they sat down and thought about it, could agree. The Cubs window is not right now. It's not when the Cardinals have Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado operating at MVP levels. It's not when some of these other teams in the National League, like the Braves and the Mets and the Dodgers, are pretty much all in. The Braves' window's in the next couple of years, maybe 1 or 2 years down the line. And Cody Bellinger, if you can get a piece back for him at the deadline, signing him to a huge mega extension after this season, if he plays like you expect him to, it's not in the cards. Like, that's not what's going to help the Cubs. I think getting some pieces back for him to prepare for that window to open up is the better move. I'm going to, try and appease some of those Cub fans with my bold prediction, and I'm going to say Nico Hoerner wins the National League batting title. And now Hoerner was a player that a lot of Cubs fans came to the defense of when we were doing our rankings for each position, and maybe we weren't respecting him quite as much, but he had 281 last year and 302 in 44 games in 2021. Now, 281 is not going to win the batting title, but he's making the switch from shortstop to second base, which will limit the defensive stress that's going to be on him. I think, that we have seen second basemen have a very an easier chance to win the batting title. You saw it just last year with Jeff McNeil, who did split time with second base in the outfield, but I think that Nico Hoerner has the ability. He's got one of the best contact swings in the game, doesn't strike out. And I think that with a better lineup, he will be able to walk more. And I know that, sounds like I'm talking about on-base percentage, but if he walks more, that means he's swinging and getting out less, which I think will raise his batting average in the process. He walked at a 10% clip in 2021, but only 5% last year, which I think was due to their lineup wasn't great. Some players were down with injury. He felt like he needed to take things into his own hands to get on base, so he wasn't looking to walk to get on base. He was swinging a lot more than normal, and I think that led to some more outs, and I think dropped his average because he felt like he was the one that needed to get it done. But now he's got more protection, he's got guys behind him, he can afford to take a walk because coming up right behind him is a Dansby Swanson or a Cody Bellinger or maybe even an Eric Hosmer or a Trey Mancini. So I think that it's definitely possible. I could see him hitting above 300, definitely. I think you got to go maybe to the 310, 320 mark, but I think Hoerner has the tools to do it, and I think he's in the right situation for the first time in his career.
Hey, you mentioned Cubs fans got mad at me. I think I had him top 10. He was like 8 in second baseman, and everyone got really mad. So you're right. He's a great player. He's a player that I like, and I think that's a possibility. I don't know if I'm in agreement with you. I think it is a little bit bold, but
that's what we're going
fans
for.
Let us know. Yeah,
that's what we're going for. Right. All right. Well,
very true.
Cubs fans, thank you so much for tuning into this video. I hope we balanced it out a little bit for you guys, so maybe leave half nice, half mean comments down in the comments section. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. You can find all of our social media up above, follow Ryan and I down below, and go into the description to watch all of the other team previews. This is the last week before baseball comes back next Thursday, and Ryan and I have, at this point, the Cubs are our 26th team doing this, so make sure you guys watch the rest of them if the Cubs aren't your favorite team. We've probably done the rest of them sometime in the past couple of weeks. If you like any team in the NL Central, Those will be coming out after this. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. We've been Double Play Baseball, and we will see you guys next time.